Thank you, Madam Chair, for holding this hearing, and other members of the committee. It's a real honor to come to the Small Business Committee to testify. We like to say we represent farmers and ranchers, but they are small businesses. And I want to state for the record probably one of the biggest concerns that I hear around the countryside is this concern over the higher commodity prices and the higher food prices. And a lot of people want to seem to point their finger at the farmers. But like any business, we have to make a profit. And if you look at commodity prices over the last 20 years, you'll find very few years where our industry has been able to get back the cost of producing the commodities that we produce. In fact, over time, the average rate of return for our business is less than 2.5% return on investment. So it's not like every farmer is out there going to the bank and getting rich. Over the past 2 years, we've seen our input costs rise faster than the price of the commodities. And if you look at all the energy that it takes to produce a kernel of wheat, a bushel of corn, or whatever, it's tremendous. John Kennedy once said farmers are the only people who buy retail, sell wholesale, and pay freight both ways. That needs to be updated and modernized to say we're also the only industry that pays the fuel surcharge both ways. We're price takers, not price makers. We can't pass on those costs. We're totally at the mercy of the marketplace. Having said that, and I did put some extensive testimony together on what we see as the causes, and I'd be glad to answer any questions. But roughly, you can't blame corn ethanol. And for those people who do, number one, have you ever tried to eat field corn? The primary use for field corn is animal feed. And if you want to look at the price paid to farmers on livestock, dairy, it's all gone down in the past year. So when people try to blame corn ethanol for all the increase in food prices, I think they're just using us as a straw man. It no doubt has increased the price of commodities, which needed to be, because the previous 10 years we averaged producing feed for animals at 27% below the cost of production. There was a very good study done by Tufts University showing the real beneficiaries of that. It wasn't the family farmers. Energy. Energy has such a direct impact on food. From the very start, all the fuel, the fertilizer, the pesticides, the storage, the drying, the handling is a big part of the farmer's input costs. But when it leaves the farm, then it's transported somewhere, more fuel. Then it's processed, which uses energy to process the product, whether it's corn flakes or ethanol or livestock feed. After it leaves there, it has to be trucked back to either the distribution chain or the retail chain or elsewhere. And by the time that consumer gets it, the cost of $127 a barrel energy is at least twice what the impact of that raw commodity is. Second big factor, weather-related production problems. Wheat is a commodity that's used for food, primarily for food. And last year, in the growing season, we had worldwide weather production problems in all the major wheat-growing countries of the world. It wasn't that a bunch of wheat acres came out to go into corn ethanol. It was Mother Nature. Cause number three, the weak dollar. Since we left the gold standard in the early 70s under President Nixon's administration, you can track high commodity prices with the value of the dollar. When the dollar is weak, and we reached 30-year lows recently, commodity prices go sky high. Investors want to put money into it to hedge against inflation. Other countries want to buy it, but with the cheap dollars that we're sending for their trade deficit, makes it an attractive buy and cheaper than it was when the dollar was strong. For speculators in the commodity markets, if you look at the real highs, the record high commodity prices that we've reached, they occurred when farmers didn't have the grain. They didn't have the commodity. They occurred in a time period when farmers were thinking about planting or waiting for the winter wheat harvest. And those prices have now moderated in the production of wheat as we're getting ready to have a good crop in areas like Oklahoma, where we had a bad crop last year, in Kansas and elsewhere. So we'll see those prices come down. And today the price of wheat in central Oklahoma is $7.70 a bushel, not the $15 that a lot of people will quote. I've got a lot in here. I won't touch, and I know I'm out of time, but let me offer a few suggestions for how we address it. Number one, we have to get a handle on the price of energy. I've read a lot of people's statements that saying corn ethanol is the only thing we can have any control over. I think that's totally false. I think that's a cop-out. We can do something about the high oil prices. We've recommended shutting off the purchases for the Strategic Oil Reserve. We've recommended opening the Strategic Oil Reserve. If it's not a crisis when gasoline is $4 a gallon, I don't know what is. And we also advocate for hunger. And the Farm Bill that was passed yesterday makes the largest commitment ever in our nation towards hunger and nutrition programs, and it needs to be. There's 26 million people in the United States that participate in these programs, and as a farmer, I have to say, I'm ashamed that anyone goes hungry, because year after year, except in rare cases, we overproduce. Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the opportunity and be glad to answer any questions.